I'm Laura, 65, sitting in my office, looking at the resignation letter from my daughter-in-law, Lily. I can't help but recall the series of events that led to this moment. It's been a long journey, filled with pain, disappointment, and finally, a glimmer of hope for a better future. It all started at my grandson Leo's 6th birthday party. I was so excited to celebrate with my family, especially since I'd spent weeks knitting a cozy sweater for Leo. When I rang the doorbell, I expected to see my son Ethan's warm smile, but instead, it was Lily who opened the door. Her perfectly manicured hand grasped the handle tightly, and her cold tone made me feel like an unwelcome guest in my own son's home. "Oh, you're here," she said, looking me up and down with disdain. I was wearing my nicest dress, but it clearly didn't meet her standards. She didn't even let me in right away, telling me that Ethan was still getting ready and that there were other guests already inside. I was shocked. Ethan had only told me it would be a small family dinner. When I finally made it inside, the atmosphere was completely different from what I'd expected. The living room was filled with well-dressed couples talking about their fancy vacations and expensive investments. I felt so out of place. But then, Leo ran towards me, his little arms outstretched. "Grandma Laura," he shouted, and for a moment, all the discomfort faded away. I hugged him tightly and whispered, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I made you something special." But Lily had other plans. She quickly pulled Leo away from me, saying that I needed to wash my hands first. It was clear that she thought I wasn't clean enough to touch her son. Dinner was even worse. I was seated at the far end of the long dining table, squeezed between an empty chair and one of Ethan's friends who talked non-stop about his latest business deals. During the main course, Lily's voice rang out across the table. "Ethan tells me you're still working at that little business." "How cute," she sneered. Several guests turned to look at me, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I quietly replied, "I own a business." She laughed, a cold and mocking sound, and said to the woman beside her, "Laura does some humble work." I could feel the subtle shift in the woman's posture, as if she was trying to distance herself from me. It was during dessert that things really fell apart. Leo climbed onto my lap, chocolate cake smeared on his fingers, and asked me to tell him the story about the brave princess. But Lily stood up, her face red with anger. "Leo, get down right now. You'll get your clothes dirty," she snapped. When Leo protested, she roughly lifted him from my lap, making him whimper. Then she turned to me and said, "I think it's time for you to leave." I was in shock. I tried to plead with her, saying it was Leo's birthday, but she just called out, "Security. Please escort this woman out. She's disturbing our dinner." Ethan stood up slowly, his face pale. "Lily, that's my mother," he said weakly. But Lily just spat. "Your mother doesn't belong at a table with decent people. She's embarrassing you and our son." I don't remember much after that. I just remember the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears and the cold air hitting my face as I stepped outside. Sitting in my car, I looked at myself in the rear view mirror. I looked like a defeated old woman, just like Lily had described me. But what she didn't know was that I was the founder and CEO of StarTech Solutions, the very company where she worked as a marketing manager. The next morning, I arrived at the office 2 hours earlier than usual. I sat at my desk and pulled up Lily's employee file. As I delved deeper into her records, I was appalled. There were 3 formal complaints filed against her in the past year, all from older employees. She had publicly humiliated them, used her position to make them work overtime on her personal projects, and even transferred one of them to the night shift because she found them inconvenient. I decided to take action. I called the HR manager, and after explaining the situation, I transferred Lily to the food services department, specifically as a dishwasher. I hoped that this would teach her a lesson about respect and empathy. Over the next few days, I watched Lily in the cafeteria. She was clearly miserable, complaining to her co-workers about how unfair it was. She looked down on everyone around her, even though they were hard, working people. One day, I decided to get closer. I entered the kitchen during the lunch rush, pretending to be a cleaner. I overheard her talking to a young man named Jake. I don't understand why they're making me do this. It's that old hag from HR. She's always hated me, she said, scraping food off a plate with unnecessary force. Jake tried to defend the other employees, saying they worked hard, but Lily just laughed and said, "These people are just maintenance. They don't have the skills or intelligence to do anything better." She also talked about me, calling me a pathetic old woman who showed up to her son's birthday party, looking like a beggar. She made it seem like she was the victim, and I was the one causing all the problems. I was furious, but I also realized that she was completely blind to her own faults. A few weeks later, Ethan called me, saying that Lily was really stressed at work and that she wanted to apologize. I knew it was just because she was looking for an escape, not because she felt any real remorse. I decided to have a face-to-face conversation with them. When they came to my apartment, Lily was dressed to impress, trying to look like a victim of injustice. Ethan looked tired and confused. We sat down, and Lily started telling Ethan that I had used my position to humiliate her. I calmly pulled up her employee file on my computer and showed Ethan all the complaints against her. Ethan was shocked. He finally started to see the real Lily. When I told him about how she had called me a poor little woman and had me escorted out of the birthday party, his face turned red with anger. He stood up and shouted at Lily, "You've been bullying people at work, and you humiliated my mother in front of everyone. I can't believe I've been making excuses for you all this time." Lily tried to defend herself, but Ethan wasn't having it. "Get out," he said calmly but firmly. "I'm done with this. We'll talk about custody arrangements through lawyers." Lily looked at me with hatred in her eyes, saying that I was destroying her marriage. But I just replied, "Your actions have consequences, Lily. You had a chance to change, but you chose to be cruel." After that, things started to change for the better. Lily eventually resigned from the company, and I implemented a series of changes to prevent similar situations from happening again. I restructured the reporting system, instituted sensitivity training for all management personnel, and promoted some of the employees who had been mistreated by Lily. Ethan and I have been rebuilding our relationship. He's become a better father to Leo, and I'm so happy to be a part of Leo's life again. I've also started a scholarship program for the children and grandchildren of our long-time employees, just like Maria, who has worked at StarTech for over 20 years. As I sit here, looking at the city outside my office window, I realize that real power comes from standing up for what's right and treating others with respect. I've reclaimed my place in my family and my company, and I'll continue to fight for a culture of kindness and dignity. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar?
Comment below.
And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.